Welcome back to Firebox Print Studio. In this video, we're finally going to get some ink on our block. Let's first have a look at how we're going to do that exactly. As you can probably imagine, there's more than one way of applying ink to a relief printing block. The way I'm going to show you here has pretty much become the conventional approach to applying ink. But I think it's worth mentioning there are other traditions, like say in Japanese woodcut, where the ink is applied very differently, but the results are no less wonderful. Now it's beyond the scope of what we're doing in this video here to cover mokuhanga, but I think it's well worth looking at if you get a chance. Before you get your ink out, you'll need a surface to work on. Now that surface should be flat and non-porous, and it'll become what's known as the inking slab. Now for my inking slabs, I prefer to use glass. Glass doesn't tend to scratch, and it's really easy to clean. To apply the ink to the block, we're going to use a roller. This one here is a hand brayer, and this large one here is what's known as a spindle roller. Now the size of your block is going to dictate what kind of roller you use, but the most common one is probably the hand brayer here. In fact, I've used this little fella here to ink up prints which are probably 1 meter by 2 meters, so you don't always have to go for the big spindle roller, although they make the job a whole lot easier. These rollers are clothed in a dense rubber, and as you can imagine, you can actually get them in different hardnesses. Now, what you're printing and what you're printing onto will kind of dictate what hardness you want in your roller. Now, as we're printing relief print on paper, I'd recommend using a medium density rubber. You can tell that by giving it a wee pinch, and there should be a little bit of give in it. And that little bit of give normally is enough as an indication that it's of a medium density, whereas the harder ones are actually quite rock hard, and the soft ones are quite spongy. Now I really must stress here that you really want to look after your rollers, in particular the rubber. You want to keep it clean, free from nicks or scratches. You don't want to drop the roller, and you don't want to leave it resting face down on a surface, because that'll wear hollow into the rubber. And all of that damage can transfer into your work. So when you finish printing, thoroughly clean your roller and store it at a place where it's not going to get damaged. Because a roller in good condition can be like your best friend when you're editioning. Like paper, there's a wide range of inks available to use in fine art printing. There's water-based ink, oil-based ink, rubber-based ink, water municipal oils. I mean, there's a whole wide range of it. And I don't think it's worth getting bogged down in what type of ink to use and their various characteristics. But in this video here, I'm going to use oil-based ink. You'll notice with this oil-based printing ink, it's much thicker than drawing ink, and it needs to be worked in order to loosen it up. Now what I'm looking for when I push the spatula through it and pull the spatula out is I'm looking to see if the ink forms peaks. And I want to see those peaks slowly fold back into themselves. If the peaks don't hold and the ink quickly forms back into a puddle, it's generally too runny, or what we refer to as too loose. Now if the ink's too loose, you may lose the crisp edges and the fine detail in your work when you come to print. Now on the flip side, if your peaks hold and don't fold back in on themselves, your ink might be too stiff. Now, this is less of a problem than if the ink is too loose, but getting a nice full image may take a bit more work when you're inking. Once you're happy with the consistency of the ink, place a thin bead of ink out on the slab. Now, unlike painting, a little bit of ink goes a long way in printing. Take your roller and start to spread the ink out by passing the roller through the ink by forward, then backwards, then lifting and letting the roller spin to establish a new point of contact, then repeat the up and back. This will roll the ink out nice and evenly. I also like to vary the directions I'm rolling the ink from in order to spring the ink out nice and evenly, because that's the main goal here when we're rolling our ink out. We want a nice even film of ink spread on the glass. Now, one hint here is you don't need to roll the ink out all over your inking slab. It only has to be enough to cover the surface area of your roller. To work out whether you've got enough ink rolled out on your slab, you'll actually have to get your nose up into the ink and have a good close look. What I'm wanting to see is a nice even film of ink on the slab, and the ink should have a texture on it, much like velvet. Before you apply the ink to the block, make sure the block is thoroughly clean of all traces of drawing and transfer material, as well as any bits of vinyl that might be hiding in the block. I like to give the block a good wipe down with some solvents and then a thorough brushing. So once the block's clean, our slabs evenly rolled out, it's time to apply the ink to the block. So we'll take our roller and pass the roller over the surface of the block and slowly build up a nice even film of ink on the surface of the block. And what we're aiming to see is that velvet texture slowly build up evenly over the entire surface of the block. So take the charge roller and pass it over the block in a forward and backward motion. Now it's not necessary to exert any great amount of pressure down on the roller. In fact, in most cases you want to avoid doing this, as too much pressure can force the ink into your carved lines and you'll risk losing all the clarity and detail in your work. Now as you slowly start to build up the ink on your block, you'll notice that the ink starts to strip off the roller. So you'll have to go back to your inking slab and recharge the roller by passing it back through the inking flume. Now it's not always going to be possible to ink the entire block with one pass of the roller, because more often than not the block's bigger than the roller. So you're going to have to develop a rolling pattern that will evenly distribute the ink over the entire block. A commonly used rolling pattern is the fan pattern. Starting in one corner, ink the vertical, then the horizontal, then the diagonal. And now you repeat this on all four corners or until the entire block has been covered. Now keep an eye on your roller and recharge the roller whenever necessary. Now once you're happy with the amount of ink that's built up on the surface of your block's ready to print. But that's for the next video, so until then, take care and I'll see you next time.